Hello everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I want to go over another interview that Naoki Yoshida did with the website Finaland. I don't know if it's like Finland with an A, or if it's like Finaland, or if it's Finaland, or I don't know. I'm calling it Finaland, so feel free to correct me on that one. They did an interview with him back at Gamescom that got released quite a bit later. I believe this was made public a few days ago, but it was taken on Thursday, August 18th. So a lot of the questions here are actually questions that some of the other interviews tackled as well. We're going to kind of glance over those. For example, they ask him about the different, indications for different attacks. Like, oh, if an attack is split damage, it always uses this giant orange marker with the arrows. And he's just like, the mechanic is the same. Might as well use the same marker. It makes it easily identifiable. And it becomes more about the players looking at the other things that are happening. Thornton is a great example of a fight that has a split damage mechanic, as well as other things happening at the same time. So I think that is a fair assessment that he makes right there. We don't need to talk about that one too much. They also ask him about dropping the PS3 support for 4.0. He says they will make that announcement sometime in the near future. We can probably guess that it's going to be Fan Festival, but we don't have any exact dates on when they'll announce if the PS3 support is going to be dropped. Personal thought, I think it will be. I think that it's more of a hassle at this point to develop different user interface things, or to determine whether or not it can be done fairly across all the systems. We've already seen the PS3's UI held back in quite a few different ways. I think that at this point, the PS3, they might be wanting to reach into, especially user interface designs, that there's just no way they're going to get it to work on the PlayStation 3. And I think that it's going to be that more than actual content that prevents them from continuing development on the PlayStation 3. But there's no confirmation yet. We will get official confirmation sometime in the near future about the status of PS3 for Final Fantasy XIV. It will continue until the expansion. It's just about 4.0 and on. We don't know if it'll stick around. They also ask him about Blade & Soul and Black Desert, if he's played them, what he thinks of them, are there any ideas that he wants to bring over. He very simply explains it's not as simple as that, especially because those are action MMOs, and this is a tab target MMO. That being said, I don't think he's opposed to the idea. I like that he makes a little distinction right here. Just to give you a support information, when those two games, Black Desert and Blade & Soul, came from Korea to Japan, both of them had a subscription model. I think that's a very important thing to note, because he seems to want to say, hey, look, they did it. We can do it. Because they ask him, like, oh, one's free to play, one's buy to play. And he's just like, well, that's not entirely true. That's true in the West. That's not true everywhere. And then, of course, how they changed their model a little bit later on. He's played them both, though, and I've played both Blade & Soul, Black Desert. Let's not talk about that in this video. Those are whole other videos for me to make. So what else do we have here? Okay, this one's very important. This has been a huge discussion, probably for about 3 patches now. The pattern of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, if you're watching this video and you're somewhat new to Final Fantasy XIV, let me break it down for you. We can pretty much predict the content of every patch that ever exists. We don't know exactly what the content, where it'll take place inside of the game, but we know what the content actually is. We know, hey, we're going to get 2 dungeons and they're going to be in a roulette. We're going to move the last 2 expert roulette dungeons into the high level, or into the level 60 roulette. There's going to be 1 new trial fight, whether it's a primal or some other boss. We don't know, but it's going to have a normal mode and it's going to have an extreme mode. We're going to get new main story patches. We're going to see new side quests such as Hildebrand or the Scholastic Kit. We're going to see some minor quality of life things and some major quality of life things. We are going to see tombstones cycle out every 2 patches, and they're going to bring a new one in. Just Final Fantasy XIV has been very predictable ever since A Realm Reborn launched. The pattern is exactly the same, minus the few additional things they've thrown in. Lords of Verminion, Palace of the Dead, Aquapolis, Diadem, and I'm missing one. I feel like I'm missing one. I don't know what it is, but I'm definitely missing one. And so they're asking, like, are they going to be doing anything? Are you going to change the pattern at all? And I've always been of the mind that a pattern is good. They just need to make the content that's within the pattern better. Making the dungeons more engaging, making the raids more balanced, or making it so it's more satisfying to clear, reworking the reward structure of the game. And he seems to kind of agree with the fact that they want to keep a pattern. You want people to know, hey, there's this reliable flow of content that's coming. And after seeing the way that other MMOs have come and gone, the promises that they've made regarding consistent content flow and releasing quality content, I completely agree with him. But I am someone who does want new things, and he does discuss that as well, that they are working on plenty of new things. That's why they've started releasing things like Palace of the Dead. That's why they've started releasing things like Diadem and Aquapolis and Lords of Verminion. It's because they want to do things that aren't in the game, or what they perceive as things that aren't really in other MMOs as well. Something unique that brings people to Final Fantasy XIV. Aquapolis, a success. Palace of the Dead, semi-success. Diadem, Lords of Verminion, huge failures. Let's hope that Diadem's rework is not equally as much of a failure, because hopefully if that fails, it may discourage them from doing things that are new more so than just doing the same old, same old. Now, they talk about that here as well. And 3.4's got new features. We know about the platoons, but we don't really know about the platoons. We know about the book with the little Mikote girl in Idleshire. And we know that in 3.45, we're finishing Palace of the Dead. He even mentions it here, and he keeps reiterating, floors 51 to 100 will probably be the same difficulty as 1 to 50. He keeps saying that 101 to 200, it will be really difficult. Those are the words, and he said that more than one time. He's making me anticipate 3.45 almost more than 3.4, because I want to know how Palace of the Dead gets really challenging. Is it just that numbers boost? Is it an actual, like, what enemies you're facing? Is it how powerful they are? There's just, like, not enough information about what will make floors 101 to 200 really difficult. He also talks about the balancing between content that's too easy, content that's, you know, too challenging, and we've seen a lot of that struggle when it comes to Alexander, and how it's very difficult. You make things too easy, a lot of people, you know, the vocal minority speaks up and says this is too hard. You make something too hard, the people who were okay with the easy content before speak up, and now there's too much difficult content. I think it's just the fact that they haven't hit middle ground and they keep bouncing from one extreme to the other, and they really need to stop bouncing from one extreme to the other, because it just makes it so that there's that constant back and forth struggle. You're always going to have complainers. You can't make everyone happy. And also he talks about the Anima weapon, how it is always going to be really time consuming and not necessarily challenging. He even says, look at this, word for word, you might say it's going to be time consuming and not really challenging, but the reason we have this content in the game is to support those who are not good at playing the game, say to beat the raid contents to get with higher item level. So if this relic quest was too difficult for them, it's going to discourage them to try it. You know what's really funny about that though? You know what discourages people more than something that's really difficult? Something that is really time consuming, because you know what difficulty ends up equaling? It means it takes you more time to beat the raid. So I think that they really need to stop looking at the amount of time or the actual difficulty floor with the Anima quest line, and think about balancing it something that isn't super easy, not raid level, but something that also isn't super time consuming. I still think that the original relic was a good example of something that, you know, people worked towards it, and some people it took a really long time before they beat Titan to hard mode. But you know what? There was this constant flow of progression. They always felt like they were moving forward, and you know what? It was never an unachievable thing, regardless of time investment, regardless of difficulty. It hit that sweet middle spot, and I think that that's what they need to kind of realize with the Anima weapon as a whole after reading this. They, again, bouncing from one extreme. It's either really difficult or really time consuming. Give us something in the middle, because that's what the majority of your player base is asking for, something in the middle. Not something that's ridiculously easy, not something that's not time consuming at all, like something that you get instantly, something in the middle, something balanced. That's what I want to see going forward with the Anima weapon quest. I know we won't with the Anima weapon, but hopefully sometime in the future they can get that kind of feedback. They also talk about, where is it? Okay, so they're talking about the whole new thing, you know, like why they have this patch cycle, whatever. And then they state this. I totally understand what you're saying. So with 4.x, we would like to give you some really new contents and challenges. This is something we would like you to look forward to. Now, I find that interesting because he's not saying 4.0, which designates the expansion's launch. He's designating 4.x across the entire expansion, which that concerns me a little bit, because then I worry that 4.0 will be a lot like Heavensward, where it'll just be a carbon copy of the game structure and it won't do anything new. It'll just be new story, new environments, etc., etc. But I'm based on some other statements he's made recently that they are developing some new and exciting content for 4.0 in one of the other videos that I did. I'm hoping that there is something that is brand new and something that is exhilarating for 4.0's launch itself. Something that isn't just, I'm going to go to the new level cap, I'm going to learn whatever skill changes there are, and then I'm going to do the same thing that I was doing before. But it's an MMO. We all know that you grind something out long enough, it's going to feel same old no matter what. Another thing here is the free companies are asking for zones with, you know, high difficulty enemies. Monsters can't be fought solo. We know Diadem is kind of that way, but it's not the same as just going to a zone, and that's the way it is. And he talks about balancing open world content. You need to always have an idea of the number of people that are going to be engaging in your content. The Hunt is a good example of content where they clearly didn't gauge it properly. There's a lot of talk about specifics. Like, you need to know how many people you want to challenge this. It's easier to balance if you know exactly how many people are going to challenge it. I feel like there's not enough sort of flow of, there's not enough dynamic flow. If you are able to design a system where it takes a calculation based on the number of enemies hitting you, doesn't need to be landing a dot, doesn't need, just landing attacks on you, any sort of attack, physical attack, parry, whatever it is, just some sort of engagement with the enemy. There needs to be some sort of scaling if there's ever going to be this kind of content where there's open world and people can group up to do it, but it's going to encourage tons of people to mob the area, essentially. Because that's how it is in Final Fantasy. If it's designed to be done with 8 people in the open world, what the hell? Bring the whole crowd up, because I guarantee you everyone will get a reward some way or another with the way the reward structure works in this game. So that being said, makes it very difficult to balance rewards, makes it very difficult to balance the actual difficulty, and I get that. But I feel like there could be some dynamic system in place here. I'm not the developer, so maybe there is some technical problem with that I'm unaware of, but other games have done things similar. So if everyone gets personal loot who participates, then there you go. I also noticed that he says the development team is currently creating something similar to the content you suggested. Something like having a gigantic monster popping somewhere and you need to have an alliance to actually beat it. I'd like to point out that part of the Diadem rework is they wanted to create what was known as a full area raid, where essentially you needed the entire zone to participate in some way, shape, or form in order to potentially see success. Now, we don't know how that content's been scaled since it was initially discussed, as it was probably nowhere near the finishing of developing, because 3.5 is when the major Diadem changes are going to be coming, and it's going to be completely revamped. That being said, I feel like he's talking about that here. I don't feel like he's talking about 4.0 at all. So he seems confident that he's creating something where people feel good about that, but he's talking about one boss, and the Diadem otherwise is not a very thrilling place to be. So I'm hoping that this whole idea they had with the Diadem, where there's a lot more direction, there's reasons to travel between the islands, you're not just confined to whichever area is the best to farm. I want to see how that's accomplished, and if this system that he's describing right here is put into that, or is something that is part of the next expansion. But he doesn't want to make it so that, like, your success or failure changes the landscape of the map. He wants that to kind of be consistent, which I'm for and against, because I know Guild Wars 2 had a really decent way of doing events where if you succeed or fail, it changes the outcome, and they've shown they can do that on a minor scale with things like the Hive fate over in South Shroud. I would just like to see them branch out a little bit more when it comes to that. Also, housing in the city of Ishgard. This answer to me just okay. So I'm going to read this question word for word, because maybe if I read it out loud, I'll understand it better. As for the housing and new housing areas, the plans have been proceeding. This is only what we can say at the moment, but don't worry. So he's just saying that that's all he can say, is that their plan is going the way they want it to. It's not that we expand the current housing areas we have in the 3 locations. It's not that we add new housing plots to that. We are making a totally different housing area apart from Limsa Lominsa, Ul'dah, Gridania, somewhere new. So the question is, are we going to get housing in Ishgard? And he just doesn't give an answer. He just keeps saying, he's basically just describing what Ishgard housing is. It's like, it's housing that's not in those 3 areas. Is it a yes or a no? That's all he'll say. He won't say if there's a yes, we're going to go to Ishgard with housing soon. No, we won't. I feel like this is a roundabout way of saying yes, but he never actually said yes. So don't take that as confirmation. They're also asking about bringing over some of the items from the Korean and Chinese servers onto the Western servers. We're trying to sell the China dress on the MOG station, the global version. There are a lot of demands and requests. We can look into it. So if you want the Chinese and Korean items on the MOG station, you got to let them know, essentially. Let's see what's here. Tank outfits contest was nice. Okay, they talk about the tank outfit contest. That was pretty cool. Next week, obviously, next week we'll celebrate the 30-year anniversary. That's passed already, so you don't need to worry about that. You have any objections that you couldn't meet? I'm thinking, for example, in-game add-ons that were promised since version 2.0. It's a really difficult question. Finally, what are your greatest satisfactions regarding what you accomplished in the last 3 years? So this is really a loaded question that is pretty hard to just kind of discuss. Brief review of the 3 years. What did you do, and what do you regret today? Or maybe what do you wish you've done differently? Are there any objectives you didn't meet? And what are your greatest satisfactions? That's a lot of questions. So I agree, it's really difficult to answer. Something I wish I would have done would be adding a lot more content and releasing more patches. So Yoshi's still not even happy with the amount of content they're releasing. He wants to, like, every idea in his head he wants to put in the game. That's kind of what made me love him as a producer and a director in the first place. It's unfortunate that it caused him to make a lot of promises of things that he wanted to put in that just never came to fruition. And they're already working with a really tight schedule, and just the amount of workload, it's impossible. So, going back in time to talk to the past Yoshida, I would say let the level 60's DPS skill rotation, that the level 60 DPS's skill rotation is really difficult and players are divided widely. So this is, again, we've discussed this before, he wants to bring down the difficulty of rotations going into the next expansion. I feel like that's a reflection of that same dedication right there. In-game add-ons. We might say that before the current status is on hold. The reason this is development gives add-ons to players. Most of them will use the DPS meter or parser. Yeah, we've heard this excuse a million times, dude. But what we want players to do is think about party DPS and to support each other kind of thing. There's still reasons why we don't give parser officially as well, and unless the development team can solve this issue, we just want to keep it as a hold. That's why it's not really progressing. What other reason other than the whole bullying thing could they possibly have? Are they afraid of it being able to read the files? Is they just haven't developed an API that prevents people from reaching into the files in a certain way? I don't know, but that's just what he's saying, so I'm just repeating it right now. I still think that it's something that we could definitely use. I don't know. I could go on about that for ages. Happiest thing in the last 3 years that they actually made it to the expansion. At the time, the original version was in a devastated status and it was chaos. We can now even hold dedicated events for Final Fantasy XIV, like Fan Festival, that we could release the expansion. So he's just happy that the game's been successful and that he's been a part of it. This would not have been happening if we didn't get any support from the fans and players. So the development team and I would like to appreciate your continuous support. Now, not just that, we were able to do the Fan Fest and even plan the next one. And the reason we were able to continue to the point of the 3rd anniversary is all because of the players' support. He's saying thank you, everyone. And I'm saying thank you, too, because you guys support Final Fantasy XIV. You support this channel. His sentiments are reflected in my own. European Fan Fest, this is just about location, why they chose a new location. 2 months ago, there was Japan Expo and Final Fantasy XIV wasn't there. They were just working with a really tight schedule at the time. Maybe that was why there was such a huge gap in live letters, because, yeah, the Paris Games Week is getting bigger and bigger. The PR costs and the marketing costs at Japan Expo. We will try to do something at Paris Games Week and research how this event could affect it. Okay, it's happening in October, and that's when FanFest is. Okay, so in other words, he's just saying schedule's too packed. I mean, that's pretty much it. And that was the end of the interview. So there's a lot of answers where I feel like Yoshi is happy that they've accomplished so much, but he's not happy with the amount they've accomplished. He wants to accomplish a whole lot more. He wants to take Final Fantasy XIV above and beyond. And that's no different from the Yoshi-P from 3 years ago. I think he's shown frustrations in the very recent past, ever since the first fan festival, where even at the North American Fan Festival, he asked people to apply for jobs at Final Fantasy XIV at Square Enix, and he was answering questions regarding what those jobs would, what kind of jobs they would be. And he's, at multiple times over the last few years, he's just asked people to apply, which is really strange, because that implies that it's not that Square Enix isn't giving them enough funds to make more. That implies, and this is based on another interview, and Naoki Yoshida just said they need 2 experienced developers. They had 2 more. They can make the raids so much better than they are now, but they need 2 well-versed, experienced developers in order to make those raids happen, and that they just simply haven't been able to find them. So it just feels like he wishes there was he needs 2 people, guys. If you're 2 people that are in game development and you understand Japanese, go apply for this position. And just, if you're experienced, go apply for this position. Because it seems like he just wants to do so much more. And he's just restricted by the number of people that he's able to get that can actually put in the work and development and the tight schedule that Final Fantasy XIV requires. So hopefully he's able to achieve his dreams, because it sounds like he just wants to do so much more, and I want to see him do so much more. I think we all want to see things like maybe go back to 3 dungeons. We want to get 6 bosses in a raid tier. We want to see an improved. We want to see Palace of the Dead and Diadem made to be fun and engaging content, something that's meaningful for the progression wall, and I think he wants that too. So we gotta show our support. And hopefully we're able to get these things that we desire without sacrificing the things that we've achieved so far. Anyway, let me know what you think of this interview. I'll include it in the description of the video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And stay tuned. Don't forget, guys, this Friday, September 17th, is the Live Letter 32, which is the Part 2 preview of patch 3.4. Marco will be translating it again, and it will be on my stream this time because he unfortunately doesn't have the internet to stream it from his stream like he did for Part 1. So, with that in mind, be sure to hit the follow button on the Twitch channel. Stay up to date. I'll be doing a reminder video this week to remind everyone it's Friday, September 17th, 9:30 p.m. PDT. That's 12:30 EST, and I think that's like 4 or 5:30 GMT. I don't know because of daylight savings. It screws with my head all the time. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching. I will see you all in the next video, and until then, take care.